If you're into sci-fi where humanity stops asking for permission and starts rewriting the galaxy, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button for more stories that leave empires trembling and aliens stunned. Now, let me tell you what happened when the NIGMA Empire ignored Earth's one warning. They were powerful, unstoppable, feared across hundreds of systems. But they made one mistake. They touched a human colony. We warned them. Now they're gone. And the galaxy finally understands. Earth doesn't threaten. Earth just doesn't repeat itself. The NIGMA Empire didn't fear much. They ruled the stars with calculation, not cruelty. When they moved, they did so with purpose. Not fire and fury, just efficiency. Their fleets were fast, cold, and silent. Their record was clean. 347 star systems, brought to order. Not one required a second strike, and for years, humanity was just a footnote, a noisy, creative, unpredictable species tucked away in the mid-rim territories. Not dangerous, not strategic, just inconvenient. The Empire tolerated Earth like a child tolerates a barking dog, annoying but hardly a threat, until they made the mistake. Not a strategic one, not even a tactical one, just a moral one. They attacked a Terran supply convoy, unmarked, civilian, human. At first they denied it, claimed pirates, blamed false flag operations, swore no official order had been issued, but the logs didn't lie. 12 crew. 14 passengers, 1 small child, no survivors. The explosion didn't register on any major military channels. No shockwave rippled across the stars. No declarations were made. But Earth noticed, not with rage, not with threats, just stillness, and that's when the warning came. Simple, short, clear. This is your only notice. Do not harm humans. Ever again. It wasn't broadcast across the galaxy. It wasn't shouted from Earth's orbital arrays. It was sent directly to the NIGMA High Command. 1 encrypted pulse, 1 digital whisper, confirmed receipt. They dismissed it, laughed even, because why would the NIGMA Empire, a galactic hegemon with fleets that could black out a star, be threatened by a species that still used combustion engines a few centuries ago? But they misunderstood something vital. Earth didn't speak to threaten. Earth speaks once, then it acts. It wasn't long before the cracks appeared. Minor ones at first. A listening post going dark. A sensor relay failing to check in. An entire battalion reporting interference before going completely offline. NIGMA's analysts blamed random failures, rogue AI activity, environmental hazards. But Earth said nothing. Not a word. Not a rebuttal. And that silence? It echoed louder than any declaration of war, because the Empire was used to noise, protests, pleas, surrender. But silence? Silence meant something was already in motion, and soon systems that once bowed to NIGMA began noticing something strange. A shadow on the scanners. A ping they couldn't trace. A presence that couldn't be mapped. Not hostile. Not friendly. Just present. And in that presence was something familiar and terrifying. Purpose. They had ignored the warning. And now? Now the NIGMA Empire had no idea what they were dealing with, because humans weren't reacting. They were responding. And when humanity responds, they don't make a sound. They let the stars tell the story. The Empire didn't react when the first outpost vanished. It was a border station, small, unmanned, automated. A relay hub on the edge of a quiet system. When it stopped responding, the standard procedure was followed. A maintenance drone was dispatched. No red flags. But the drone never returned. That got attention. They sent a frigate next. One of their older vessels. Not combat ready, but sufficient for recovery and scan work. It didn't return either. No wreckage. No distress call. Just silence. The sky had gone quiet. Still, the council brushed it off. They'd seen signal loss before. Rogue tech, solar flares, maybe pirates with stolen masking drives. There was always an explanation, always a reason that didn't lead to panic. But then a colony disappeared, not attacked, not bombed, disappeared. 200,000 people, gone. Scans showed no impact craters, no radiation, no atmospheric breach, just a world with lights turned off, not a soul remaining, and no sign of struggle. That was when panic crept in, not from fear but from confusion. The Empire was used to war, used to weapons, to resistance, to rebellion. But this wasn't war. There were no demands, no invasions, no captured territory, just absence. It was like something was erasing them, quietly, precisely. The NIGMA Fleet Command pulled back 2 patrol groups to regroup. Ships moved from offensive formation to observation mode. Civilian communications were filtered. The public was told it was a classified maneuver. Internally, it was a scramble. They ran system-wide diagnostics, checked for sabotage, rechecked records of Earth's known military capabilities. Nothing added up. Earth didn't have stealth fleets, didn't have planet-scale transporters, didn't have cloaking technology beyond low-level field distortion. At least, not according to the records, but now those records looked old, naive, written by observers who thought humans were still catching up. They weren't, because something no one could name, was moving in the dark. And the Empire's vast web of control, built over centuries, was now full of holes. They called in the Science Corps. Researchers analyzed the pattern of disappearances. It wasn't random. It followed routes, specific ones. Ones that traced back, not to war zones or resources, but to places where humans had once been. Stations where Earth had contracts, mining colonies where Terran engineers once worked, trade hubs where human freighters used to dock. It wasn't targeting military targets. It was cleaning up history. And that's what terrified them, because it meant this wasn't revenge. It was precision. Someone, something, was removing traces, not out of rage, out of principle. The NIGMA Empire issued a closed-door directive. All Terran origin systems are to be placed on Blackwatch. Avoid engagement, divert resources, do not provoke. It was the first time in 2 centuries they'd used that order. And it came too late. Because the sky wasn't just going quiet. It was being cleared. And Earth still hadn't said a word. The NIGMA Empire had one of the most advanced sensor networks in the known galaxy. They could spot a stealth shuttle behind a gas giant, track a cloaked warship in the middle of a starstorm, pinpoint irregularities in gravitational flux down to the millisecond. But whatever was moving between their systems now wasn't showing up on any of their screens, not until it wanted to. The first image came from a long-range observatory station on the edge of the Zalon corridor. A blurry silhouette, big, angular, wrong. Its shape shifted with the angle of view, bending light like a prism, but darker, heavier. Like it wasn't displacing space, but quietly unfolding through it. The footage lasted 12 seconds. Then the station went silent, gone, like the rest, but not before the data was transmitted, and when it reached the Empire's central command, it was reviewed by the highest-ranked analysts, officers, and AI clusters in the quadrant. The conclusion was unanimous. That is not a Terran ship. The propulsion signatures didn't match. The design didn't match. Even the physics didn't match, and yet, there it was. Moving between systems effortlessly, and every time one of these non-ships was spotted, another NIGMA installation went offline. Not attacked, not destroyed, just removed. The Empire sent 3 warships to intercept one of the anomalies. They never even got close. They vanished on approach. And the next morning, a single encrypted message arrived in the fleet's central archive. It wasn't routed through official channels. It didn't come from any known origin. The message read, "We warned you, this is restraint. No signature, no voice, no language. Just a sentence burned into the core of the Empire's confidence." It was then that the whispers began to surface among the lower officers. Officers who had worked joint missions. who had trained with humans, who had shared drinks with Terran captains and walked through their dusty outposts. They started asking the question the admirals refused to say aloud. What if those ships aren't Terran military? What if they're something humans found or built in secret? But the more they studied the footage, the less sense it made. Because what the images showed didn't look like vessels. It looked like machines grown from thought, asymmetrical, adaptive, perfectly silent, no seams, no ports, no weapons, just presence, and behind that presence, the sensation that they weren't seeing everything, just the part they were allowed to see. That was the true horror. The idea that whatever these things were, they didn't consider NIGMA a threat. They didn't even consider them relevant, because these things, whatever they were not reacting. They were completing a task. And that task seemed to involve removing NIGMA from the board. Cleanly, effortlessly, without anger, because humans had sent a warning once. And these ships weren't here to warn again. They were here to follow through. It came through the emergency frequency, the one reserved for catastrophic loss of life. The signal reached the command tower of Virex 6, a Class B colony world deep within NIGMA territory. A farming hub, strategically unimportant, but densely populated. The transmission was short, only 9 seconds long, but in that span, every system on the colony flickered, lights dimmed, gravity pulsed, every AI process paused, and in that silence came a voice. Not loud, not distorted, just human. We told you not to touch ours. This is the consequence. No anger, no cruelty, just balance. That was it. No return address, no encryption key. Just the message. Then the lights came back on. Everything looked normal. The sky was clear. Crops continued to sway in the wind. Children played in the field domes until the countdown began. It didn't come from Earth. Didn't come from orbit. It came from underneath, as if something buried deep beneath the planet's crust had been awakened. A humming, low, rhythmic. The very core of the planet seemed to vibrate. Virex 6 had been settled for 70 years. No records indicated seismic instability. No mining tunnels ran that deep. But now the planet began to crack. Not violently, not explosively. Like an eggshell under slow, steady pressure. By the time the orbiting station caught the anomaly, it was too late. The colony went silent. From space, it looked like the land had folded in on itself. No fire, no destruction. Just gone. One smooth depression where a city once stood, and above it, where nothing had ever been before, hung one of the silent ships. No motion, no signal, just watching. By the time NIGMA Command received the full report, the rest of the planet was being evacuated, not by NIGMA personnel, by ships with Terran power signatures, civilian ships, medical carriers. No weapons, no flags, just assistance, no explanation, no coordination, just one shared phrase, repeated across all. The ship's logs, not for revenge, for memory. When the news reached the high command, something finally broke. Not a ship, not a shield, but the illusion that Earth was still playing the same game. Because this wasn't war. It wasn't retaliation. It was a response, measured and irreversible. The Council debated activating the Apex protocols, deadly last resort weaponry designed to counter species-level threats. But even that suggestion felt hollow. Because how do you target something that doesn't threaten you? How do you fire at ships that make no sound and leave no wake? How do you go to war with a civilization that isn't trying to win, just to correct? And that was the moment the Empire truly understood. The first message hadn't been a threat. It had been a final chance, one they ignored. Now they were no longer losing a war. They were being removed from history, one system at a time. The NIGMA High Command finally snapped. They'd watched outposts go dark, colonies vanish, Ships disappear without so much as a flare. Now they moved. They deployed Fleet Redesignate Vora Prime, the most aggressive and well-armed battle group in the Empire. 72 ships, 4 dreadnoughts, quantum-linked targeting, anti-stealth web grids. Enough firepower to sterilize a planet in under 30 minutes. They weren't going to observe anymore. They were going to fight back. They found the target easily. One of the unknown ships, the silent kind, was observed near the Yelros Nebula, slowly moving along what appeared to be a patrol route. Fleet Vora Prime approached in a tight phalanx, weapons charged, shields up, ready for confrontation. They never fired. They never got the chance, because one by one, starting from the lead dreadnought and rippling outward, the ships began to vanish from sensors, not explode, not break apart, not even flicker, just vanish without light, without sound, without resistance, as if they'd never existed. One ship managed to transmit a partial message. "We can't see it. It's not real. It's..." And then silence, just like the rest. The Empire's entire fleet was gone in under 4 minutes. When Command pulled up the satellite footage, there was no debris field, no energy spike, no disturbance. The ships were just gone. That's when the term vanishing point entered the lexicon, a classified phrase to describe areas where NIGMA personnel and assets disappeared without trace or record. Initially just 3 locations, then 15, then 90, entire sectors began registering anomalous data, stars that flickered for a fraction too long, magnetic fields that reversed polarity, asteroids caught in gravity wells that shouldn't exist, and in every case, no sign of conflict, just an absence where presence used to be. The Empire's strongest assets couldn't touch it. Their best scientists couldn't track it. Their intelligence agencies couldn't explain it. And their political leaders? They stopped speaking publicly altogether, because every attempt to respond was met with the same result. Nothing. And nothing, as it turned out, was the most terrifying force in the galaxy. Refugees began fleeing NIGMA space, not toward Empire strongholds, but away from them, toward unaligned systems, toward the mid-rim, toward Earth, and Earth allowed them in. No flags, no parades, no lectures, just shelter, water, food, safety. No questions asked. That more than anything broke the spine of NIGMA's myth, because even now, with everything happening, Earth didn't gloat, didn't boast, didn't strike. They simply allowed the future to shift, and no one could stop it because NIGMA wasn't being defeated. They were being forgotten, like pencil marks erased from a galactic map. And what was left in their place? A silence no one dared break. By now, every fleet admiral in the galaxy had seen the reports, and none of them could explain them. No energy signatures, no enemy fleets, no invasions, just silence, just systems going dark, and then nothing, no occupation, no conquest, no Terran presence. The space once governed by the NIGMA Empire became a void, not a battlefield, a blank space, and through all of it humanity said nothing. No declaration, no broadcast of triumph, no campaign for control, because Earth wasn't interested in planting flags. They didn't want what NIGMA had. They just wanted to ensure it never happened again. That silence, the kind that lingered across dead systems, spoke louder than any speech ever could. Humanity could have moved in, taken over, seized every resource-rich sector now empty. They had the tech, the ships, the momentum, but they didn't. Instead, Earth offered assistance to the displaced, to the abandoned, to the survivors who didn't understand what was happening, but knew that something enormous had shifted. Terran aid vessels arrived in former NIGMA border systems. No warships, no demands. Just food, medicine, engineers, and always, respectful silence. No one claimed responsibility for the disappearances. No one needed to, because everyone knew. This was humanity's answer. And it wasn't vengeance. It was restraint. Earth wasn't acting out of fury. They weren't punishing. They were correcting. Because they had warned NIGMA once. Only once. And when that warning was ignored, humanity didn't argue. They didn't protest. They remembered. And the ones who'd lived through it, the few who escaped, the captains who watched systems vanish in quiet pulses of unreality, they would never forget what Earth had said at the start. Do not harm humans. That was it. Not, or we'll destroy you. Not, or we'll come for your worlds. Just don't. And that kind of power, that's what shook the galaxy most, because it meant Earth didn't act from ego, didn't seek dominance, didn't crave approval. They simply acted when necessary, and only then. And when the act was done, they returned to their business, helping, rebuilding, quietly existing, like they hadn't just reshaped the galactic map. The Central Galactic Council demanded a meeting. They sent envoys, delegates, pleas for clarification, for diplomacy, for understanding. Earth replied with a single message. We warned them. We didn't need to repeat ourselves. This matter is closed. The message wasn't encrypted. It wasn't even protected, because Earth didn't need to protect it. The galaxy would remember, not the firepower, not the technology, not even the disappearance of an empire. They would remember the silence and the humans who honored it. NIGMA's fall was not marked by grand battles or final speeches. There were no burning capitals, no surrender treaties, no last stands. There was only absence. Entire planets gone. Command centers reduced to quiet fields. Fleet registries purged, as if they never existed. And still, Earth didn't speak. Because Earth hadn't destroyed NIGMA. NIGMA had destroyed itself, not with weapons, but with arrogance. They had been given a choice. A single line drawn in patience and restraint. Do not harm humans. They crossed it. And then they acted surprised when the universe responded. But the response hadn't come from Earth's armies. It had come from the consequences Earth no longer held back. Because what the galaxy forgot was that humans don't threaten, they warn. And warnings to humans are sacred. They give you one chance to reconsider. If you don't, they don't raise their voices, they don't send fleets, they don't start wars, they remove problems, permanently. Quietly, precisely, NIGMA had studied humans for decades, watched their history, their infighting, their politics, and they assumed Earth was fractured. They assumed humanity was too distracted by its own chaos to organize anything meaningful. They assumed wrong, because while NIGMA was watching Earth's governments, Earth was building underneath them. A civilization united not by banners or bloodlines, but by memory. Humanity remembered what it felt like to be prey, to be overlooked, to be told, you don't matter. And so, when the time came, they didn't argue. They simply acted, not for conquest, but for principle. And the galaxy finally understood. Earth's silence wasn't confusion. It was conviction. The absence of debate wasn't delay. It was decision. And the vanishing of the NIGMA Empire wasn't revenge, it was removal. An erasure not born from anger, but from balance. Because Earth had watched NIGMA harm the helpless, and Earth doesn't forget the helpless. Not ever. Now, no charts list the NIGMA territories. No records display their military assets. No ships bear their flags. Not because Earth wiped them out, but because Earth made them irrelevant. And in a galaxy ruled by reputation, irrelevance is the cruelest fate of all. They weren't defeated. They were dismissed, forgotten by force. And the galaxy didn't cheer, didn't mourn. It simply moved on. Because when the stars shifted, when the power tilted, when silence replaced sound, everyone listened. The space once occupied by NIGMA remains untouched. No new borders drawn, no fresh colonies planted. No scavengers looting the remnants, because there are no remnants. Just silence, and a kind of reverence, not for NIGMA, for the absence they left behind. The few who remember what it was like before the stars turned quiet and humans moved. Like myths, They speak softly now when Earth is mentioned, not out of fear, out of respect. Because the lesson wasn't written in blood, it was whispered in silence. And silence, it turns out, carries farther than any weapon. What remains is not the power Earth displayed, but the discipline they showed in not displaying more. They could have carved up the NIGMA territories, could have installed puppet governments, could have rewritten galactic law in their image. Instead, they walked away, back to their systems, back to their worlds. Back to their work, they offered help to the broken, aid to the scattered, a home to the forgotten, and they never once said, "This is ours now." Because Earth didn't want thrones, they wanted peace, not the kind forged through treaties, but the kind born when you keep your word, and others learn to believe you mean it. That's what remains now. Belief. That when a human says, "Don't," they're not bluffing. They're offering a way out, and if you take it, you'll never hear from them again. But if you don't, you won't hear anything at all. And that silence, that's the end. No explosions, no headlines, just the quiet hush of a civilization removed not by hate but by resolve. Now on distant trade stations and deep sky colonies, when young cadets ask about the missing sector, they're told only one thing. That was where NIGMA stood. And then they didn't. Because they touched something they were told not to. There's no fear in those words, just truth. Because Earth didn't raise its voice. It didn't repeat its warning. It simply kept its promise. And now, across the stars, those who once scoffed now listen. Those who once towered now step lightly. Because the lesson isn't just about power, it's about memory. And humanity? Humanity remembers everything.